Hey everyone, it's Diana from Adventures with Art, and today we are talking about Procreate drawing guides and everything you can do with them to make your art amazing. There's a lot of things that Procreate can do that traditional, paper and pen can't do, obviously. And the drawing guides are one of those really amazing tools where you don't have to pull out your ruler and try to draw straight lines and guides and grids all of the time. You can have that automatically done for you in Procreate. And there's a lot of neat things that it can do with in this area that can be really helpful for your art. But before we get started, please smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, keep coming back to Adventures with Art for more art tips. All right, so let's first talk about how to access the drawing guides. What you're going to do is you're going to click on the wrench up at the top to open the actions panel, and you're going to see a little toggle switch almost in the middle there that says drawing guide. You're just going to switch that on. That's going to activate whatever drawing guide you were previously using. So I was using the 2D grid. In order to change that, you're going to hit edit drawing guide. Now you're going to see all of the drawing guide options come up. So let's talk about those and what you can do with them. First thing, you're going to notice a color bar up near the top. This will impact what color your drawing guide is. So as you can see, it just shifts as I move that color over. That can be helpful if you want, to keep your grid within the same color palette that you're currently working with, or if you want it to be, thick lines and everything, but you want it to be somewhat lighter, that can be helpful to just move it on over to these lighter colors over here. We'll keep it dark for this demonstration. All right, next thing you want to notice is this green dot up above. If you use that, you can actually rotate your grid. That can be helpful if you want, your squares to be rotated for any reason. You can just use that green dot up there. This blue dot is going to move your guide around your screen. All right, so here down below, you're going to have your opacity slider. This will make your grid darker or lighter. The thickness, that will increase or decrease the thickness of your actual lines. So, these two you want to play around with depending on how visible you want your guide to be as you're working. Lastly, here is our grid size. So this will make your grid smaller or bigger depending on your needs. All right, so next we should talk about the assisted drawing feature. So I'm just going to show you what happens if I draw without the assisted drawing feature on. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to come back to my screen, and I can just draw and draw and draw, ignoring the guide altogether. All right, but let's say that I turn that on instead, and then I come back here to draw. It only lets me draw where the guide is. So what it's going to do is no matter how much you try to squiggle, it's going to only draw straight lines. This can be really helpful if you're trying to get perfectly straight lines really quickly. This just can be a really helpful tool. Don't forget you have it on though, because it can be frustrating if you're not trying to draw straight lines, obviously. But that can be really helpful for use of this guide. All right, so that's our 2D grid. Now let's go to isometric. So isometric is basically the same idea. It's just that you're going to have isometric triangles. All of the other same rules apply, and so does our assisted drawing rule. So if I were trying to draw any kind of squiggly lines, it's going to revert to any type of straight line along the drawing guide that I currently have in place. So that's just an important thing to keep in mind. All right, so now let's dive into our next drawing guide, which is perspective, which is where things can get pretty fun. So what you're going to do is you're going to tap down on your canvas, on your screen here, where you want your vanishing point to be. So if I say I want it to be up in that corner, I just tap and there is my vanishing point. So now you can use this blue dot here to move it around, say if you didn't like where that vanishing point was placed. It's really important to move it with the blue dot and not to tap anywhere else on your screen, because if you tap somewhere else on your screen, you will get two vanishing points, which can be fun depending on your, whatever you're going for, but not so helpful if you're just trying to move one of your vanishing points. The other thing to note, I'm going to get rid of this one here. You can also tap outside of your screen. So if you have a vanishing point that's outside of the image, you can do that. So you can just tap a vanishing point that's outside of your image there. I'm going to move it into the screen just for demonstration's sake. The perspective guide also does work with the assisted drawing. So if I'm done here, and this is where I want my vanishing point, it will draw for me lines that are consistent with the drawing guide with the perspective. This can be extremely helpful if you are trying to draw buildings, landscapes in perspective, and you need those perfect lines that align with the vanishing point. Something to keep in mind is that if you try to draw a perfectly vertical or horizontal line that is not even relevant to the vanishing point, it will let you do that. So you have to kind of be a little bit on track with the vanishing point in order for the assisted drawing to work in that case. All right, the last one is also a really fun one. This is the symmetry. So symmetry, the default option is going to be vertical. I'll show you what this does. So if I have, just a vertical line here, what it's going to do is it's going to just replicate whatever I do on one side of the screen to the other side of the screen. All right, this is on the mirrored symmetry function. Mirrored symmetry is what it defaults to. Okay, so that is important to keep in mind. Here is basically what mirrored symmetry does. If I write a word, it's easier to see. It will basically just mirror what I do on the other side. There's also a setting for, actually, I'm going to leave that up so that we can see the difference. There's also a setting for rotational symmetry. So if I open up the drawing guide and I come down here and I click the box for rotational symmetry, I click done, and then I try to do that again, as you will see, it will write it upside down and backwards. So it rotates it quite a lot. So just keep that in mind. It can be a really neat way to have your symmetry work, but it can also be really frustrating if you haven't realized that that box is checked, because it does rotate things quite a bit. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and turn that off for now to show the rest of the symmetry settings. So this symmetry line can be moved just in the same way you would move any other line with your drawing guides. This blue dot will move it around your screen, and this green line will rotate it. So let's say that I want a really dramatic, symmetry there. As you can see, it will just create your symmetry wherever you end up going. And if you come here over to an area where like the canvas isn't even showing because the symmetry line is so far over, you'll just be drawing over here and nothing will happen on the other side. So that's a way to like create symmetry in some areas of your work, but not in others. All right. So let's say I move this symmetry line and I'm like, oof, that's now not where I want it. I want to make sure to have a perfectly vertical line. What I can do is just click options, click on a different one of the options, and then revert back to vertical, and it will straighten your line out for you. So if you messed around with it and you want it to go back to where it was, just revert back to that option. All right, so let's talk about what the horizontal does. Pretty self-explanatory. It will make a horizontal line for you. Quadrant, that one is pretty neat. This will create 4 quadrants on your screen. And so as you draw, it will create symmetry within each of those 4 quadrants. This is a really neat way to create patterns without it being a lot of work, time, or effort, and yet it looks like it was. So that's always a fun trick. The next one we're going to talk about is even cooler in that regard. So let's dive into that one. If you click on the options and you click on radial, it will create 8 sections of your screen. As you draw, you can get some pretty wild and awesome patterns going here. So this can be just a really fun way. I find it relaxing. So if you're just looking for a way to relax, or you want to create a cool pattern in very little time or effort, the radial symmetry is a really neat way to do that. All right, those are the drawing guides. So these are really neat to play around with, like I said, and as you've just seen, can be a really great way to create some precision in your work without having to pull out a pencil and ruler and get really straight lines every time. Procreate does a really amazing job of doing that for us, which is great. All right, hit that like button. Keep coming back to Adventures with Art for more art tips. I will see you next time.